What is this wheel that Catherine had miraculously escaped, but that went on to kill many of the less fortunate? Another name it's known by, the breaking wheel, will probably give you some ideas. It was a wheel made of wood, similar if not the same as those used on carriages. In addition to being made of hefty wood, these wheels were outfitted with a metal rim, though sometimes they would be modified so that they could inflict further damage with protruding iron blades. These massive wheels would then be dropped on convicts all over their body, breaking bones upon impact. Another approach was to tie a person to the wheel and hit his or her limbs with iron hammers or bars while the wheel was rotated. As long as the bones were shattered, that was all that mattered. The exact amount of wheel drops or hammer hits were already determined beforehand. This would depend on the extent of the convict's crimes, such as if they committed acts of robbery or murder. For the worst offenders, efforts were made to better match their punishment to the crimes. For example, sharp pieces of wood would sometimes be set underneath the victim to bring yet further torture. On the other hand, for those they wanted to spare the worst, they could deliver a fatal blow during the wheel dropping or iron hitting process or right after it was over. Unfortunately, most were not so lucky, and the bone breaking was only the beginning, or step 1 of 2 or 3. Following step 1, bodies were typically threaded through the spokes of another wheel. While this would be difficult to do with a normal person, it was much easier once their limbs were broken. The wheel was then attached to a pole and displayed for all to see, much like those who had undergone crucifixion. At this point, some would be cut apart or strangled, which would finally, though painfully, end their suffering. Others would be placed above a blazing fire, or alternatively thrown directly in one. It was even possible for the individual to be hung while on the wheel, though this option was generally reserved for those who had been found guilty of either the very worst crimes or multiple serious offenses. The executioners in charge had no mercy, even upon the souls of those they had killed. Bodies were simply left where they had been thrown or hung up to be eaten away by the beaks, teeth, and claws of wild animals. Many believed that this would prevent the souls from ever finding eternal peace. It would also serve as a gruesome warning to others. But there was one little hope for those sentenced to death by the Catherine wheel, and that was if they somehow became disengaged or if the wheel in some way failed to do its job. In these circumstances, it was seen as divine intervention, and the conflict's life would ultimately be spared. However, this was highly unlikely.